I'm Connor Jones.
And hi, I'm Micah Tomasella.
And this is Culture Brief, a Denison Forum podcast where we navigate the constant stream of top stories in news, politics, sports, pop culture, tech, anything else. And we're doing it all from a Christian perspective. And let me tell you, we got a ton to cover this week. So, Micah, why don't you give us what's on the docket for this week?
Well, Connor, the first thing that's on the docket is the fact that you and I are matching today. Did we plan this?
No, not at all. We both hopped on here. We were like, uh-oh.
Yeah, but neither of us wanted to change, so it just kind of is what it is. We're both wearing the official Denison Ministries pullovers. That's exciting, always repping the ministry. But let me tell you what we're going to dive into today. So we've got Russia-Ukraine peace talks. We've got executive orders. We've got childhood hobbies and stories and a rundown on everything you need to know this week. So let's jump into The Brief.
The Brief. Okay, Micah, let's hit on the big thing happening right now in just the geopolitical world.
Yeah.
It's going to be Russia, Ukraine, the war, and the United States started to kind of initiate negotiation and potential peace talks. So here's what's going on currently. Last week, Donald Trump had a call with President Putin of Russia. That was on Wednesday, I believe, February 12th. What they did was agree to commence immediate negotiations aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. This would be a good thing. I mean, obviously, we're going on 3 years of this terrible conflict when Russia invaded basically a sovereign nation and has just killed tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, injured and destroyed many, many cities and tons of people. Anyways, they did agree to commence those negotiations. Vice President J.D. Vance was in Munich, Germany this week at the Munich Security Conference, and he met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And Zelensky said they had a good meeting with Vance and that they were ready to move as quickly as possible towards a real and guaranteed peace. I think that's a good thing, right? Seems positive. Yep. Okay.
But
here's the catch right now.
But
Ukraine is not actually currently involved in any of these negotiation talks.
Neither is all of Europe,
Europe's
by the way.
On the sidelines too. It's like the two big kids in the room are like planning a game and they're leaving the younger sibling out. You know what I mean? It's obviously far more serious than that. But Ukraine's
I got left out
happy.
Sometimes.
Ukraine's not happy. Europe's not happy. And Russia and the U.S. are just like, I'm sorry. Did you say you got left out sometimes?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry to bring up bad memories.
You just ignored it.
I just kept going. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Anyways, so the U.S. and Russia have just been kind of doing this on their own. In a way, it makes sense. They're two of the big superpowers in the world. Obviously, Cold War, the many, many years of history here. So they met in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. That was the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and then the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. They met and had discussions. Sergei, sorry, what did I say?
No. Yeah. I was just like Sergey, like I know who he is. I've never heard of him before.
Oh, well, he's like Putin's right-hand man.
Yeah, there you go.
And he does a lot of the just foreign leadership work for Putin. So they did meet in Saudi Arabia as kind of a middle ground, and they agreed to start restoring embassy operations in both countries. Yeah. And they're going to try to establish a high-level negotiation team dedicated to resolving the Ukrainian conflict and explore avenues for enhanced diplomatic and economic cooperation. Ukrainian officials and European leaders not being invited to these initial talks does have them concerned. They are being critical of it. They're just worried. They're like, why are we not involved with this? This is our continent. But it's, Trump and his administration are taking it under their own hand to try to get this solved and done. European leaders like French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized that any peace effort must include strong security guarantees for Ukraine and involve European participation. So they called their own emergency summit this week. The European leaders did in France and Paris, and they discussed their exclusion from these talks, and they started to try to strategize what they can do to ensure their involvement in future negotiations. This led to some of the countries saying that they are willing to deploy peacekeeping troops to Ukraine. So remember, Micah, as of right now, no Western troops have actually stepped foot on Ukrainian soil.
Right.
It's just been Ukrainian troops and any sort of volunteers that come from foreign countries, but no other military has actually gone in to support Ukraine with boots on the ground.
Yes, but there has been heavy funding, specifically from the U.S.
Heavy weapons donations, all that.
So many stimulus bills, so much money, billions of dollars sent to Ukraine.
tons of weapons, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
These countries have all been supportive. The U.S. has been supportive. Canada, all the NATO
The U.S.
nations have
has
been very
been the
supportive.
most monetarily supportive, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. The Ukrainians are using many U.S. purchased or built weapons and drones, missiles, all of that. Anyways, no one's had boots on the ground, so some of these European countries suggesting they may be willing to do that is kind of interesting. It's almost like it feels a little bit like a last-ditch effort to be part of these negotiation talks. All of that to say, Ukrainians' perspective, Zelensky, of course, is frustrated over being sidelined in the negotiations. He's emphasizing that any peace agreement must involve Ukraine. Now, Rubio and some of the other leaders in the U.S. have said that Ukraine will be brought in at the appropriate time. So, hey, you guys can come join us when it's time, but it is their country that's in the war and that was invaded. So I totally understand that their desire is to be a part of these negotiations and figure out a peace on their own terms. Zelensky definitely cautioned a rush ceasefire. He did suggest that it could be a benefit to Russia if they are allowed to regroup, and stressed that the importance of continued U.S. support is needed for a genuine resolution. Ukrainians definitely see Putin as a terrible, terrible person. Even a lot of them would call him a terrorist. Zelensky calls him a terrorist for invading their country and killing so many of their people. You can't blame them for that. You can't blame them for being even frustrated that the U.S. is negotiating with Putin.
Of course.
We've always had the mantra of we don't negotiate with terrorists, so Ukrainians are asking the U.S. to have that same stance. And then, I don't know if you saw this, but the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, sparked a significant diplomatic conflict this week by appearing to exclude the possibility of NATO membership for Ukraine, which is something that Ukraine has been really begging for, is to be included in NATO at the end of this war.
Yeah, Pete has been coming out with some quick information there. I mean, even a few days before that, he was saying that Ukraine would have to cede some of its border, the one that's, the part that Russia had taken over. And then Pete kind of walked it back. And so, I mean, he does that daily video from his office, or he does like all of this content, which, is interesting to me to see this as Secretary of Defense kind of taking a more hands-on approach to leadership and like letting people in on his process. But it does seem
transparent.
Definitely Pete's been, I don't know if jumping the gun's the right word, but he's definitely been saying some stuff before anybody else is willing to.
Yeah, he's actually, I think, had to walk back some of his comments. So maybe he's learning fast what it's like to be one of the top diplomats, not just in America, but in the world.
In the world.
It's a little bit different than being on the news. So he's learning. Anyways, what does the U.S. want in all of this, Micah?
Yeah.
First off, they want normalized relations with Russia. Trump has always said that he's a friend of Putin and he wants to have a good relationship with Russia, start, reinvigorating their economy, having more trade, reducing the oil sanctions, everything that comes in with that. Trump also wants the U.S., and I think, one of the things with him is himself, to look stronger and to force Europe to stand on their own without the guarantee of U.S. security in this conflict or any future conflicts. He specifically wants NATO nations to put more of their own GDP into defense spending and not have to rely on the idea that America is going to come in and swoop in and protect them the way that we consistently have over the years and have always said we would.
I'm sorry, that's fair. That's fair.
I don't disagree.
It's geographically much closer. It's right there. Europe is right there, right? We're kind of across the world here. And so, I mean, even geographically and the resources that Europe has, I mean, I see the merit in that for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, it makes sense. I do get that. Okay, but here's the kicker. Here's the last big thing that the U.S. is wanting. Trump has said that he wants Ukraine to pay for everything that we've given them over the last 3 years through the stimulus bills, like you were saying, the billions and billions of dollars, the weapons, all of that we have quite literally just given them. He wants repayments, sort of like a loan, like, hey, we gave you all this, now pay it back, and here's how you can do it. So Trump sent over the new U.S. Secretary of the Treasury to meet with Zelensky and lay out a plan for a $500 billion basically investment in minerals that Ukraine has as natural resources in their country that are pretty much untapped. They have all these mines, they have all this underground mineral deposits that is very, very valuable. Could be worth up to $500 billion. And the U.S. wants that. They think that it could be very strategic for basically technology, all the tech that's coming down the line, AI chips, everything, and it would help the U.S. stay on par with where China is at in technology development. And so their plan is, hey, we have helped you. We may even give you some air defenses as a peacekeeping tool to prevent Russia from invading again. But in return, you need to give us access to all of your minerals. So
isn't it like half?
Zelensky was
Wasn't he asking for like half?
Something like
something
that,
like that, yeah.
It's not all completely laid out. Zelensky has rebuffed a little bit, but said he's open to the idea and that they are still having open negotiations on that. But I'm just saying there's a lot going on here. There's a lot to take in. It's going to continue to happen over the next few days and really weeks. Trump has said he hopes to have a peace negotiated by Easter. That is 60-something days away from now. Mm-hmm. And so that's not a ton of time. It may be doable. We'll just see. Basically, what's happened now is the talks to start talking. Like they're talking about talking.
I mean, it started, right? I mean, and that's, right. So hopefully the solution comes down the line where Russia pulls back, Ukraine can be its own free country, and there's some things set up in the future for Ukraine to be able to take care of themselves, NATO to do what they need to do, the European nations need to do what they need to do, and that there's less friction with Russia, if that's even possible. I mean, with somebody like Putin in power, I mean, that feels hard to reach, but hopefully there's a better solution coming down the pipe.
Definitely. And there was even an NBC insider report this week that said Putin, even though he's trying to negotiate and start these peace talks, is dead set still on having the entirety of Ukraine in Russia. So
that's probably not going to happen. Right. So
it's probably not going to happen, but it also may be him just trying to strong hand and say, well, you got to give me more than, he's a smart negotiator. If there's one thing you can say about him, he is. He does it in very bad will and with a hard, darkened heart, but he's a smart negotiator. So yes, you're right. Hopefully peace is around the corner. This is like we've been saying with all the conflicts around the world, specifically in regards to Gaza and Israel. We are praying for peace and an end to this conflict and then into the destruction and devastation on these people and these villages, and these towns, these communities, and the death. And it's just awful. It's been hard to watch. And I think, when this war initially broke out, it was a big deal and all of America was watching it. And it felt like an attack on a fellow Western nation and all of that. And it was very easy to kind of have camaraderie with these people. But over the last 3 years, I think that's been distanced. And we felt that distance and we felt some, not we specifically, but a lot of Americans have felt animosity towards the conflict and everything. But we should still pray daily for an end to this conflict. And I wanted to bring up real fast, Micah, Dr. Jim Dennison in the Daily Article on Tuesday wrote about Jesus coming to preach the good news of the kingdom of God and he didn't question it, but he was posing the question, why is the kingdom of God good news? Well, we have a king. Despite the tragedies and challenges of this broken world, there is purpose and order to the cosmos, as stated in Colossians 1:16 and 17. And like Luke 4:43 says, Jesus did come to preach the good news of the kingdom of God. And unlike the autocrats and terrorists who seek to rule by force, this king knows and loves us.
Yeah.
That includes everyone. Includes you, me, Ukrainians, Russians, everybody involved in anything around the world. He loves us. And we can have that personal relationship with him that will save and transform us. And I'm grateful for that today, Micah. Just a good reminder that through the midst of everything that we see, even on the homeland or across the world, we know we have a good and loving Father who came to preach the good news of the kingdom of God.
Amen. Amen, man. That's a good reminder. Thank you for taking us through the ever-evolving Russia-Ukraine peace talks. Really, it should be Russia-U.S. peace talks is what we should have called it, because it doesn't seem like Ukraine is getting to play kickball. Seems like they didn't get picked to be on the team this time. But we'll see how all that works out. Connor, I want to talk about executive orders for a minute. I want to talk about the history, the legality, and the recent use of executive orders. So let's jump into this next story.
Well, okay.
So, we've been hearing executive orders thrown around quite a bit. I did a segment on tariffs a couple weeks ago, and I just feel like these words have been on the forefront. Trump was campaigning on these things, and then he's delivering on what he said he was going to do, even probably more than people were anticipating. And so let's talk about the history of executive orders. But before I do that, I want to hit everybody with a simple definition of an executive order. And this comes from the American Bar Association. So if you don't agree with it, let them know. So it says an executive, let the lawyers know. It said an executive order is a signed, written, and published directive from the President of the United States that manages operations of the federal government. So executive orders, or EOs, whatever you want to call them, have been a presidential tool since George Washington, used to direct the executive branch without Congress. First executive order recorded in American history was in 1789, and over time, they've shaped major U.S. policies like the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. President Abraham Lincoln issued an executive order to free slaves in Confederate states. Internment of Japanese Americans in 1942. Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, issued an executive order that authorized the forced relocation of Japanese Americans during World War II. You had the desegregation of the military in 1948. President Harry S. Truman issued an executive order that ended racial segregation in the armed forces. So those are just a few executive orders that actually had a profound impact. It might have just been the start. It's still, those laws had to pass Congress later, but those were really big historical moments that were actually brought about by an executive order. What do you think about that, Connor?
Well, I just think if every executive order had a unique rhyming name, like the Emancipation Proclamation,
yeah, that's nice, dude.
More people would get behind them. You know what I mean?
What about internment of Japanese Americans? That one doesn't have
that one didn't have the ring to it, and seemed to actually be the exact opposite of the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah, so, right. Seems like a reversal, right?
It's very interesting to see kind of the history here of how these have been used over the years, and just kind of how powerful the president really is with just kind of the swipe of a pen, signs this piece of paper, and these things happen.
Right. So here's the legality of it. Here's where we kind of get executive orders from. So executive orders derive authority from Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, which requires the president to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. That seems a little broad. However, they cannot create new laws or override existing ones. Courts can invalidate executive orders that exceed presidential power. So there was this court case in 1952, Youngston Sheet and Tubco versus Sawyer, where the Supreme Court blocked Truman's attempt to seize steel mills during a labor strike. So that's kind of the basis for what we're seeing with all of these courts and all of these judges that are freezing what Trump does through an executive order, allowing it to continue, stopping it. So that case in 1952 with Harry S. Truman is kind of where we get the basis for how the American court system can kind of combat it if there's a belief that it's actually against the law what the president's trying to do. So let's talk about why presidents issue executive orders. So what's their reasoning, right? So presidents issue executive orders to swiftly implement policies, especially when facing congressional gridlock or urgent situations. So for Trump, he has a mapped out first 100 days, and so he's pushing, and so it's literally an executive order or two every single day. And so the common reasons for why we've seen it throughout history, why we're seeing it now, is crisis management, needs of national security in order to implement certain policies, reversing predecessor policies. There's been a lot of specifically environmental policies that Trump has immediately come in and reversed. You know, we've seen a lot of policies on gender that he's come in and reversed. And so there's been a lot of things that he's focused on to just reverse everything that Biden did. Just like when Biden came in, he did the same thing to Trump whenever Trump left after his first term. And then, you know, they do it to avoid legislative gridlock as well. And so they definitely have their reasons, you know?
Yeah, well, you know, and some of it is based off of what they promised on campaign trails, like what Trump is doing with a lot of these.
Yep.
Some of it, this is where it gets tricky, is how much of it is just personal desire. How much of it is they're like, I'm the president, I can do this. That's where I guess you expect the courts to step in and say, no, we're not gonna allow that. We're gonna overturn that one. So just interesting stuff. Thanks for walking us through that.
Yes. And so Roosevelt, FDR, let's go back to him for a second, because I want to compare and contrast what FDR did compared to what Trump's doing now. There was this article from Politico today, and they reminded us, and I was reading, that Roosevelt signed 99 executive orders in his first 100 days, more than any other president at that point. So Trump 2.0 during his second term could end up smashing that, should smash that record at least. But it's not like we've never seen this before. It's not like we've never seen a president come in and immediately get to work in that way and use his additional presidential power to do executive orders. But the debate that comes up about the legality of it and when to use an executive order and when not to, and what has to follow an executive order, those questions are still being answered. But when Barack Obama came in 2009 to 2017, he issued during his 8 years in office, 276 executive orders focused on things like regulatory reform and national security. Joe Biden in 21 to 25, he signed 162 executive orders, signed a lot of those during his last 6 months. He had AI regulation, environmental policy, government spending, all kinds of bills had kind of come from him signing those executive orders. And then Trump, in his second term, he's already signed 54 executive orders, and we're just a month in or so. And so, he's off to a feverish pace. He's done government restructuring, social policies, international policies. These actions have sparked a ton of debate about the balance between executive authority and legislative oversight, as well as concerns over potential overreach and the undermining of democratic institutions. And when we, went back to what Article 2 of the Constitution said, it does seem kind of vague. So this remains a powerful tool, and, everybody's just kind of scrambling on the part that executive orders have to play.
For sure. Yeah, well, and I know the Democratic Party right now is still reeling from the just massive losses that they had during this election. And so this just constant barrage of executive orders, and then also a whole bunch of other things, just Trump and his team are really good about staying in the news quite literally every hour and just dropping some sort of news or executive order, whatever it is. They're struggling to fight back on the executive orders in the way that a normal opposing party would, and say, we're going to get together. We're going to figure out how to fight this in the courts, file lawsuits. I do think that they're starting to get there. There's been some lawsuits filed by Democratic politicians and federal prosecutors and all of that. So we'll just see. We'll
see because his plan right now, it's like 3 weeks from now, he'll have a whole lot more executive orders, right? And so it's getting to the point now where they're filing these lawsuits from executive orders that he signed into law like 2 weeks ago, and then he's already doing something.
When it was in the first 10, and now he's already at 54.
It's just this insane barrage. But let me give you a spiritual application. I was really thinking about this. I was really, really thinking about this, and it just kind of hit me. So each president in recent years, as I kind of ran through them pretty quickly, has issued more executive actions than the last. It's just continued to kind of ramp up, especially since Obama. But normalizing a practice it was never intended explicitly by the Constitution. I just read you from the Constitution where they get executive orders from. So with each election, reversing them becomes harder. So likewise, sin gains more power when we allow it, making repentance more difficult. So what begins as justifiable in our minds can quickly entangle us until only God can step in and break the cycle, or something happens and we choose to break the cycle and repent. So his intervention, God's intervention, is often painful, but it's also merciful. So offering us the chance to turn back before we're completely lost. So the best way to avoid that hardship is simple: surrender to his will and walk with him. So executive orders, it just continues to be ramped up. And the more and more that it becomes normal, the more and more difficult it's going to be to rein it in. And so in the same way, the more that we give into sin and the more that we hide things that we're struggling with in our lives from those that love us and want the best for us, and the more that we try to hide things from God, which is actually impossible, it's just going to take you deeper and farther than you ever imagined. And so the time is now to repent and turn to Jesus, not later.
Yeah. Man, that's good. That's also true. And thank you, Micah, for just kind of the explanation on the executive orders. I just sat here and learned a lot. So, I mean, kind of one of those terms that you hear all the time, but just don't know the history of. And then thank you for that spiritual application.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, that was fun. Thanks, man. What's next?
Well, Micah, I think we need to try something new here.
Okay.
Let's go through quite a few things rather than just one big topic and diving into it deeply. We're going to give a big high-level overview of a bunch of stuff that's happened in this last week. It's been a busy week. We're going to hit on it all across the board with entertainment and sports and finance, everything. Let's dive in. Okay, so things you should know. Micah, first and foremost, the Daytona 500 did happen this past Sunday. Mm-hmm. William Byron got his second in a row, back-to-back wins. I watched the last few laps of that. It was wild. There was an insane wreck where a car just like popped a wheelie and stayed in the air forever.
I saw that video.
That was fun. Dramatic crash. Anyways, that happened. That was fun. What else do we have, Micah?
All right. So we have the Four Nations Hockey Tournament. If you haven't heard about this, I think you probably heard of it when you saw what happened with U.S. versus Canada. So the U.S., Canada, Finland, and Sweden are these 4 teams that are competing. They're 4 hockey powerhouses. So the U.S.-Canada game was nuts. Okay, so 3 fights broke out in the first 9 seconds, and it all started because this game was happening in Canada. And when the Star Spangled Banner played, the Canadian crowd booed during the entire Star Spangled Banner. And you can see the American players did not like that whatsoever. And so what happens is they each picked their fight. They dropped their gloves. They took turns. And there were 3 individual fights that happened within the first 9 seconds of that game. The game garnered tons of attention with the fights, and the rematch for the championship is set for Thursday. So Thursday night, the day that our episode is premiering. So on Thursday night, Canada and the U.S. are facing off again for the championship.
Let's go.
And it's for blood,
Dude,
man. It's for blood.
The patriotic memes out there on social media are wild. Everybody is like just feeling super just juiced up with patriotic love.
I loved it, dude. I mean, you're going to boo our national anthem? Oh, yeah. Oh, I loved it.
Did you see the Babylon Bee article that said Canadians boo their own future national anthem because Trump keeps threatening to make Canada the 51st state? That's funny.
And for those who don't know, the Babylon Bee is like a satirical Christian news website. But just go on there and just make yourself laugh. Just do yourself a favor. But my goodness, yes, Trump keeps joking about making Canada the 51st. Yeah, he's probably serious. The 51st state. But then you know he'll also, these tariffs, these different things that have kind of happened have changed some perception. And so I think that's why the Canadian crowd was booing. But nonetheless, the U.S. hockey players did not appreciate the booing.
They did not, and they won that game big time, and the fights were awesome. So we'll see what happens Thursday night. Okay. Also, this past weekend was something that I don't think anybody watched. It was the NBA All-Star Weekend.
I didn't either.
Yeah, I didn't watch it. I don't think anybody enjoyed it, and it seemed to get a lot of flack, even from players and other commentators. I'm only bringing it up because it's interesting to consider what just happened with hockey. That basically replaced this Four Nations tournament, replaced the NHL All-Star Week. And now NBA players and even some MLB players are saying, hey, maybe we should take a page out of this book because interest in our own All-Star games has dwindled. The NFL Pro Bowl is basically a joke now. Is this a new way to do it? Put, American players versus European or other foreign nations and make a little world tournament?
Yeah. We were talking about that just a little bit ago, right? Because in the 90s, European players from around the world, I mean, you had like Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon, who was an international player who played for the Rockets. You had Dirk getting drafted in the late 90s, but he didn't really come into his own until the mid-2000s. I mean,
right.
Dirk really broke the mold for European players. And then since then, I mean, you could field a very, very good world team, European team with Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Victor Wembanyama. I mean, those are 4 of maybe the top 12 players in the NBA, and they're not American. And so I think just now recently, the last 10 or so years, 10, 12 years, this game actually would be incredibly interesting if they decided to do that.
I think they would juice viewership, get a lot more entertainment than whatever
I think it's a good idea.
They just put on the floor the other night. Anyways, moving on. There was a plane crash, another one, Micah. And we talked about all the plane crashes a few weeks ago. There have been so many in the last 2 months. In Toronto, a Delta Airlines commuter jet with 80 passengers and crew crashed. Thankfully, everybody lived. The videos are absolutely insane. I've got a link. I'll put it in the show notes if you want to see the video of this plane quite literally hard landing and flipping over on fire. It is upside down on its roof, essentially belly up, and everybody has to get out from the upside down aspect of the plane.
No fatalities, right? Yeah.
No fatalities, some injuries. Honestly, it's a miracle, but just a wild plane crash. And just kind of another wake-up call to, man, we got to figure some stuff out with our aviation safety.
Yeah. And it just kind of keeps feeling like I keep getting these news alerts about these small planes crashing, these bigger planes crashing. I mean, there's just so much focus on the FAA right now, so much focus on pilots and air traffic controllers. I mean, we're just praying for everybody involved in that and that we can figure out a better way because, right now this all just seems to be happening a little bit too much. But Connor,
a plane dropped out of the sky in Alaska the other day too. I don't know if you saw that, and that killed 10 people. So it's just like, that one didn't make the news that much. And probably because it was between all these other big accidents in bigger cities.
I did see that. It was a smaller plane.
Yeah, it was like, one of those Bush planes in Alaska, but it had 10 people on board and just went
My
missing.
goodness.
Anyways,
Yeah.
crazy stuff. What were we about to say? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, let's just get to the next one. So we had SNL 50. So Saturday Night
Yeah.
Live had 15 million viewers. There were a ton of stars on it. I saw a lot of the highlights. I didn't watch it live because it was actually on Sunday night, right? So it was Sunday Night Live. And there was, a nod to Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively and the feud with Baldoni, a story that we covered last week, and many viral clips and some funny and others just, flying around social media because people were upset, about certain things that kind of took place on it. But, did you watch it? Did you watch the thing live?
I watched,
did you watch it all?
There was a lot happening on Sunday night. I don't know why they put this on Sunday night. I'm trying to watch the final laps of the Daytona 500. I'm trying to watch,
of course,
tune in to a little bit of the All-Star NBA game. Didn't even end up making it there. I'm trying to watch a whole bunch of things. I got a crying baby. It was crazy.
Yeah,
so,
man.
No,
yeah.
I watched like one or two skits. Mostly saw the funniest parts on social media, which I'm going to guess is how most people.
That's what I did too. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, I did think that the Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively kind of thing was a little awkward and did not land the way they hoped.
No, it didn't. But it was fun to see all those stars return. I mean, you forget how many famous people got their start on Saturday Night Live. I mean, you forget like what a training ground that really was. I don't think it's the same as it used to be, but it catapulted so many careers of people who are A-listers. So that's kind of what I was reminded of when I was watching those clips.
Yeah, it's seriously same. It was awesome to kind of reflect back on that. Okay, moving on. We did have floods this week in Kentucky. I'm not sure if you saw this, but there have been 12 people killed in flooding in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Really sad stuff. So be praying for those communities there. Extreme rains. Okay, and then, Micah, I don't know if you've seen that it's now come out that the U.S. is spying on Mexican cartels with drones over the country of Mexico, their own sovereign territory. I'm not sure. I assume the Mexican government is aware, but this is happening. And it's probably because Trump has designated Mexican cartels, drug cartels, human trafficking cartels, all of that as terrorist organizations. So now they can use U.S. military resources to do whatever they want. This could spell that there's drone strikes coming in the future if they're going to try to hit drug labs or any top, targets or whatnot. So we'll just see. That's interesting, right?
Yeah, the executive orders to designate the cartels as terrorist organizations is a big step in what Trump was trying to do, and it allows the U.S. government to take it up a notch to combat everything that kind of comes from cartels. That was a big part of the negotiations for Trump with these tariffs with Mexico and Canada, that they would declare the cartels terrorist organizations as well, and they have. And so we'll see what comes from this. But did you also see what's going on with the Pope's health, Connor? Have you seen some of those updates?
He's got bad pneumonia. He's in a bad situation.
Yeah. So Pope Francis he's 88, right? And so he was hospitalized this week with pneumonia in both of his lungs, with the Vatican saying he has a complex clinical picture requiring adequate hospitalization. That is an interesting word picture there. So it's something to keep an eye on. He's looked to by a whole lot of Catholics around the world as kind of a forerunner for their faith. So, I mean, this is a big deal for a whole lot of people, and we need to be sympathetic to that. And, obviously don't want anything to happen to him or for it to end this way. But he is 88. I didn't realize he was at that age.
I didn't realize that either. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. Okay, something that's impacting probably everyone listening to this, Micah.
Yes.
It's killing me. These egg prices are just, I eat like 2 eggs every morning, sometimes 3,
same.
sometimes 4.
Astronomical.
Big omelet guy here. And so I am having to cut down because these prices are insane. They have gone up in price 53% year over year. So right now, an average for a dozen eggs is $4.95. So just an insane amount of money compared to what we're used to. And then this is really happening because there's a big bird flu going around, wiping out just millions of chickens. So until that gets repopulated, we may be suffering from these high prices for a while. Maybe everybody needs to just go get their own chickens.
I was about to say, man, we have friends who have chickens, and they're definitely looking like the smart ones. They're definitely looking like the smart ones, and they're definitely saving a lot of money too, I think. They're
saving money, and they could be making money. If they really wanted to, they could sell eggs. I'm sure people would pay for them.
That's right. That's true. Okay, so we're So we're also in, you talked about bird flu. Well, let's talk about the flu season. So we're in a severe flu season right now. And health officials report that this flu season is the worst in 15 years, with estimates of 29 million cases across the country. So this has been a pretty bad flu season. There's been entire school districts in the DFW area shut down because of how flu has affected the entire school district. I mean, which has just been kind of crazy.
Feels like I know somebody in every facet of my life that has the flu or just got, recovered from the flu. So bad season. I've avoided it so far. Hopefully you do too. Wash your hands, everybody. Man.
Right.
Okay, Micah, also big thing. Elon Musk and the DOGE Department of Government Efficiency, are continuing to just implement serious budget cuts across federal agencies and reducing government spending. And a lot of that is happening through layoffs. So there's just mass layoffs happening across the government. People are concerned that things that are extremely important are going to be cut. That's already happened, actually. They, I think, laid off like 300 nuclear people from an agency this past weekend and had to rehire them back because they realized that those are the people who manage the nuclear stockpile. So just something interesting there. And then on top of that, in the private sector, Southwest Airlines, and this is big for the Dallas area because that is where Southwest Airlines is headquartered, announced this week that they are reducing their corporate workforce by 15%. That equates to almost 2,000 positions. This is the first time Southwest Airlines has ever done mass layoffs. So a lot of this is because a private equity company came in and bought up a big chunk of their just stake and stock. And so now this is kind of the result of that and trying to recalibrate to a new airline and aviation world post-COVID. So
my goodness,
and I know we've got some personal friends that work there and all that. So shout out to all of our Southwest people. Stay strong.
Yeah, definitely a tough time. Praying and hoping that they land on their feet. That's definitely tough. Well, Connor, tell us about what's going on with the New York mayor.
Yeah, I'll make this brief, but essentially we need to keep an eye on this. Everybody keep an eye on this. Eric Adams was charged with, and I think September of last year, bribery, fraud, and soliciting foreign campaign donations. Not a great thing. He's the mayor of New York, and that's a very big political office, bigger than most governorships in America. So this is very crucial to just that economy and honestly the U.S. Because of that, he took a lot of heat, but then Trump's Department of Justice went ahead and just cleared him of all those charges and told the federal prosecutors to drop the charges against Adams. Obviously, this has been rebuked across the board from Democrat leaders and New York City leaders. So the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, is consulting with other Democrat leaders to figure out what they should do. And she does have the power to actually just remove him from office. It's never happened before, has been considered before, but would obviously be a massive move for something that's...
wow, really?
This is somebody that millions of people voted for to be the leader of their city. So we'll see what happens. She suggested this week that she is considering it.
That would be very interesting. There's obviously a lot of things on the peripheral with this, right? There's a lot of things of, hey, Trump is kind of supporting this guy. Trump is letting this guy get off scot-free and easy from their perspective. I mean, all of these things he was accused of, I don't actually know what the truth is here as far as if he actually did some of those things. Right. Oftentimes it's kind of in the middle, it's like he might have done some of those things, but maybe not all those things, it's kind of how it ends up. So that would be really interesting if she did that. But Connor, let's talk about this new Captain America movie. So the latest Captain America film has received an underwhelming response, reviews, and low end box office returns from what's expected from a Marvel film, specifically a Captain America type Marvel film. Not a good omen for the future of Marvel. And honestly, Connor, I saw a preview for a Marvel movie that I hadn't heard of last week, and I just caught myself rolling my eyes. I am almost just...
Thunderbolts movie?
Yeah. I don't know. No. Just like this group of people that they were trying to introduce as new heroes. I just found myself like, I'm kind of done. Like Marvel had its day. I just kind of feel that way. I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. Remember when we used to go to like the midnight premieres in college?
Oh, man.
To all those big Marvel movies, and they'd come out. Now we're kind of like...
And they were always so good. Yeah, they were always
absolutely
so good.
Zero desire to see this Captain America movie, sadly. So, anyways, last thing, I feel like we should mention this. There is an asteroid headed towards Earth, so that's fun. try to make it sound more positive than it is. Here's the positive side, man. News you can use. Yeah, so basically, NASA is saying in 2032 there is a 3.1% chance that this asteroid hits Earth. So you got a few years to prep if you feel like doing that. Here's the kicker. They keep increasing the chances every few days. So like 2 weeks ago, they were saying there was a 1.2% chance this asteroid hits Earth. And now it's 3.1%. So and it kind of keeps going up a few percentage points every day. So hopefully it stops.
And
this is the highest
aren't they calling
on record at NASA. What's up?
Well, aren't they calling this asteroid the City Destroyer?
I don't know. Is that, are we giving it a name now?
Yeah, they literally were calling it like the City Destroyer, right? Because it's going to be big enough to like wipe out like a large city.
It's something like 300 feet wide. It's essentially the size of a football field, which would destroy a city. My guess is if it did hit Earth, it would land in the ocean somewhere. But that could be tsunami causing.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be bad no matter what happens if it hits Earth.
Even if it does hit Earth, the odds that it hits a very populated area is low, right? So, I mean, within that 3.1%, the odds get even smaller if it does impact. But yes.
Anyways, keep an eye on that one.
Yep.
Michael, all this to say, there's a lot going on just in our world. Obviously, we just went through a whole bunch of things happening this week alone. I would say I'm very guilty of this. I'm sure a lot of people are. It's so easy to be just overwhelmed by it and even let all this stuff be a distraction. And that's one of the reasons we want to do this podcast. We want to just give it all to you in an hour so that you've got, or even less than an hour sometimes, so that you've got it all. And you don't need to think about it that much more unless you want to take a big spiritual application to it and say, okay, let me pray about this or whatnot. All that to say, in times like this where it just feels like you're overwhelmed or anxious about everything going on in the world, just draw near to God and he will draw near to you. That's what James 4:8 says. If you're anxious about all that's happening, draw near to God. If you're constantly in like go, go, go mode and have a mind full of thoughts and you're struggling to sleep and you feel like you can't separate from what's going on in your life and your personal life or just everything in the news and in the world, draw near to God. I would say if you need help with that, we have a great resource that we could recommend. That's actually one of our other brands here at Denison Ministries. That's First 15 Devotionals. I think Mike and I can both attest to the fact that that has been a very powerful resource for us individually.
Huge,
I would go to first15.org. That's first15.org. I'll link that in the show notes. It's daily devotionals. It's got worship and scripture, reflection, and it's very peaceful. It's for the first 15 minutes of your day. Couldn't recommend it more. All right, Micah, we got a great email this week from a listener. I'd love to talk about that. Why don't you take us through it over in the mailbag?
Yep, let's do it. Let's jump into the mailbag. So we want to continue to hear from you all. Please send us your questions or thoughts or topic ideas to culturebrief@denisonforum.org. Our listeners have been so good about this. Continue to send it. We want to talk about what you want to talk about. So we got this fantastic question and this conversation starter in from one of our listeners this past week. Catherine, thank you for this question, Catherine. All right. So here's what she says. Let's talk about childhood hobbies and sports. Connor, we know you collected coins and stamps. The whole world heard this last week, that you are an avid coin and stamp collector. You still might be. You didn't even really say that. But what hobbies and sports did you play, Connor? And do you play any instruments?
Okay, let's clarify a few things. I don't collect those things anymore. I was never like a super avid collector of stamps and coins, but I had a decent collection, some boxes full of those things. Anyways, today I don't play any instruments. You don't want to hear me sing or try to play an instrument. My musical talent is basically non-existent. It just lives in my head and in the, singing in the shower type of situation. So that's where I'm at with that. I did do theater, which doesn't necessarily bode well for somebody with no musical talent, but it was still fun. Did some
and somebody who collected coins and stamps. Yeah.
Fair. Anyways, sports wise, played some basketball, played some soccer. I played middle school basketball. Guess what? I was the starting point guard on the C team of my middle school basketball team, not the B team, not the A team, the C team. We were
dropping dimes though, man.
We were running the offense. Of the barrel. You know what I'm saying? Anyways.
Yeah.
Honestly, Micah, I'm such a nerd. I had two big hobbies when I was kind of a kid and growing up, and that was watching movies. Just big movie buff and nerd. Watched movies all the time as a kid and as a teenager. And then I loved watching the news. It's part of why I enjoyed doing something like this podcast.
I did too, though.
Because
I liked watching the news too.
News junkie, and of course sports and all that. But man, when politics were happening, I'm watching every debate. I'm watching every primary result roll in, everything there, anything going on in the news. I was watching Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity as a kid on primetime every night. So that was me. Kind of weird. What about you? I was like a 40-year-old man in an 8-year-old's body.
Yeah. So the question came in and kind of asked Connor and I the same thing. So Micah, what sports or hobbies did I play when I was or what was I involved in when I was a child, a teen? What did I collect, and do I play an instrument? So sports, played football through junior high, and then I played baseball and basketball throughout my life through high school. Went to a small school, so I'm not even sitting here and saying the fact that I was on those varsity teams was anything impressive, but I always did play sports. I always enjoyed it. It was kind of a big part of how I grew up. I also enjoyed the news as well. One of my hobbies was the news. One of my hobbies was also watching sports. So some of my greatest memories are going to Rangers games at the ballpark in Arlington, going to Cowboys games, even when the stadium was in Irving, going to Mavericks games and prime Dirk years, even going to Stars games. Those are some of my best memories of just watching those games or going to those games whenever I got to go. The few times I got to go were just huge memories and moments for me. Was big into politics, news, loved sports, all of that stuff. Now, did I collect anything? I collected baseball and football cards. When I moved off to college a long time ago, I think my mom got tired of holding on to them, and so we decided to get rid of them. Maybe I got rid of some valuable cards. I don't know. Do I play an instrument? Depending on who you ask, can sing. My mom says I sing like an angel. If you ask anybody else, it's pretty debatable on if I can sing well or not. It just kind of depends on the day.
Why don't you ask me right now?
There
I
you
can
go.
give you an answer. Ask me. What do I think?
Connor, can I sing?
Sure you want me to answer that?
You told me to ask you.
I think you're okay. Would I hire you to lead a worship segment at a church? Probably not.
Yeah. No, I don't think I would either.
Yeah. Would I do karaoke with you? Yeah, sure. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah. I'll take okay. I think speaking has always kind of been more of a skill that I'm kind of better at than singing. So I'll take that. Well, that was a little bit more about us. Catherine, thank you for that question. That allows us to kind of talk a little bit more about us and kind of what's helped form us and what we've been into and what we continue to be into. But let's jump into this tune-in section here, Connor, and let's talk about what's coming up. Tell us.
Yeah, so this week, here's what we got. We've got quite a few shows coming out. Honestly, it feels like an inundation of just television shows right now. I can't keep up with everything coming out. But hey, did you see the trailer for the show House of David about King David from the Bible coming out? Amazon Prime.
I cannot wait. It's an MGM production, but then it's also through this Christian production company. I mean, and I've been reading about it. It looks like it's going to be legit and pretty biblically accurate. I mean, and if you just think about it, like 2025, a show filmed and shot, just what we're going to witness and see, the life of David from Goliath to him becoming king I am very excited about this show.
Me too. I feel like it's going to be similar like The Chosen, but of course this Old Testament character and just awesome to see it lived out. Okay. Also on top of that, we've got, I know you're big into this, Suits LA. A lot of the country has been waiting for this to come out because after the big Suits revival on Netflix, this is the spinoff that's this weekend, Sunday night on NBC or Peacock, wherever you want to watch that. So Suits LA. Are any of the characters from the main Suits going to be in that?
I don't think so, but in the trailer, they have a photo of Harvey Specter, who's like the main character of the original Suits show. And they're kind of implying he might make an appearance or two. I mean, and I'll tell you what, I'll watch the whole season just to see him pop up once or twice. I mean, I'm a big Harvey Specter fan.
Yeah. That'll be fun, especially if he does show up. That's going to probably break the internet. Okay, and then Netflix has the show called 0 Day coming out, starring Robert De Niro. Something along the lines, I briefly watched the trailer. Yeah, it's like he's a former president. There's been a big terrorist attack in the U.S., and they bring him back in to help them figure out how to move the country forward and track down the terrorists, all of that. Interesting concept. I don't know if it's going to be any good. That releases, if you're listening on Thursday, that releases tonight. If you're listening after that, it's already out. So go check that out.
I mean,
on Netflix.
On concept alone, I mean, that might be something I might check out with all of my spare time. Just kidding. Don't have a whole lot of that, but that does sound like a really interesting concept. Okay, and then we've got Full Swing Season 3 coming out on Tuesday of next week on Netflix. So Full Swing is like an all access to these players on the PGA Tour, the Live Golf Tour, I mean, there is so many stories it's going to cover. Scotty Scheffler getting arrested there for a second when he was, I mean, just all kinds of stuff with Rory and then his divorce, but then not divorce. I mean, all the things in that trailer, I was like, my goodness, this was a huge year in golf. I cannot wait to watch it.
Yeah, dude, it's always been really good. The last 2 seasons have been great. It's similar if you've ever watched the F1 show on Netflix. It's similar to that, just getting access to the behind the scenes of these sports where you're seeing the parts that you don't ever get to see.
Yeah, any kind of sports show like Hard Knocks. You know, they've done one called Quarterback. They've done one called Receiver. I mean, it's definitely just more of like an in-depth look on the day-to-day lives of professional athletes, and it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, it's fun. Even if you don't like golf, it's actually, I think for both of us, our wives started to get more into golf after they started watching the show. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and then the big one, we already mentioned this, but Thursday night, tonight, is the U.S. versus Canada hockey game in this Four Nations face-off tournament. This is the championship game. Let's go USA. If you're from Canada, I don't know what to tell you. You're probably going down. Hopefully we get some good fights. And yeah, I think I'm just, dude, those 3 fights in 9 seconds that got me pumped up. I'm like ready to play some like Freebird. Let's get this going. You know,
you're going down, Canada. I'm all in on it, man. I'm all in. Go USA. Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Culture Brief, a Denison Forum podcast. All articles and videos mentioned will be linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please please subscribe, and please rate and review the show wherever you consume the podcast, and share with a friend. We'll see you next Thursday.